Hello, Annie here. So today I'm on here to speak a little bit about, from a meta perspective, meta relating our relationship with attachment theory, and therapy spaces in general. So first of all, a meta conversation, which I might have mentioned before, can look like talking about how we talk or talking about a communication pattern. It could also be framed as a zoomed out or bird's eye perspective on a dynamic. And that dynamic could be interpersonal, in an intimate relationship, or it could be a societal piece. It could be a part of the social or cultural ecology that we are couched in, that is the context of our experience, that is the context of our relationships that we're in. Sometimes overlapping if we're, with someone, or, it might be a dynamic in a community where it's cross-cultural too, definitely relevant. So anyways, I just wanted to define that meta conversation. It's really important in any type of relationship. This could also be in a platonic, familial, or work relationship, to normalize meta conversations, to normalize checking in about communication itself, or about any patterns that you or someone is recognizing. And not only for challenge, but also for positive things, or for joy, or for what's easeful, what's going well. Because when we emphasize these things, it really helps to balance out our biological parts that are our negativity bias. So our negativity bias is the parts of ourselves that have a bias towards what's negative in our lives, because that's what keeps us safe. If there's a part of us, a primal part of us, that latches on to threat or threatening experiences from the past, stories from the past, sometimes that's manifested as trauma, like it's stuff caught in our nervous system, stuff caught in our bodies from the past, because that's what's keeping us safe moving forward, in one degree or another. And I know it can be complicated because the coping mechanisms around that can add a layer of complication, but just naming everybody who's an animal, who's a person, has a bias towards negative experience, remembering those negative experiences either physiologically or in our minds to some degree, because of that biological primal aspect around safety. So just naming those pieces. Attachment theory is basically, I'm not sure why it's so much a theory, but just so you have a little bit of background, the research that's been done around attachment theory has been done a while ago, I think in the 90s, but don't quote me on that part. Not necessarily super relevant, but the experiments, the research was done on emotional attachment in infants to their mothers. And then in comparison to how that shows up in adult hetero monogamous relationships, romantic monogamous hetero relationships. So infant and mother, and then adults in hetero romantic relationships. And the reason I like to point this out is because, as Jessica Fern states in her book, Polysecure, that research doesn't necessarily represent any amount of accuracy of how many people do relate to attachment in adult romance or otherwise intimate relationships. Because as we know now, many people relate to open relating, where they don't want to be monogamous. And then also intimacy is this vast spectrum. So you can have emotional intimacy without physical intimacy, vice versa. Many other aspects of intimacy that we tend to just lump all together into monoromantic normativity, which is it's not an accurate representation of like how many people actually want to and are in romantic relationships or sexual or intimate or physical, or however you define that for yourselves. So yeah, I wanted to name the background around attachment theory. And so a little bit more about my work and my background. So because I'm not a licensed therapist and I did not go to school for a master's in therapy, but I do work with trauma because of the intersection of sex positivity, sexual awareness, as well as the somatic experiencing and trauma healing. I get a lot of clients who have tried to work around these things with traditional American therapy with no results. And so working somatically, having a foundation in sex positivity, having this body-oriented work with trauma-informed is vitally important for a body-oriented challenge or goal, which is sex, of course, is about the body in one way or another for most people. So yeah, I've had a lot of clients who basically have not been able to find their needs met in traditional therapy. And then I also have clients who I've worked with who have trauma from therapy because traditional American therapy is based in diagnostics and is based in analyzing symptoms and adjusting behaviors or thoughts, as opposed to getting connected with your own intuition and body, and then the change coming from that, which is a bottom-up approach. So Western therapy is top-down, meaning change how you're thinking or change your behaviors, and then it will change the core. And then the somatics and also other alternative body-oriented indigenous practices tend to be more bottom up. You have an experience and then your thoughts or behaviors can organically change from having this felt sense experience. And of course, no one way is like better than the other. It's just that in our society, there's traditionally in the last at least 100+ years, only been that one option where it's more top down, cognitive based, intellectual based. So just naming that they're both important, and research shows now too, actually a combination of both is really helpful. So the somatic modalities tend to be based, they were birthed, Western somatic practices were birthed from this American traditional therapy, psychotherapy in the last 100 years. And they're like, okay, we need to add in the body. So it's encapsulated in that cognitive foundation, acknowledging the attachment theory and acknowledging, that thoughts are in the body. So thoughts are somatic too. And if somebody thinking about going inward into their sensations or into their body is intimidating or completely unapproachable, then it's still appropriate because thoughts, for example, are happening in the body. So it counts as a body-oriented experience to process through thoughts. Just a little different angle where we might slow things down or pause a bit, and we might bring in some imaginative or creative thinking in with that cognitive processing. So I wanted to give that background because I know I'm this is not just new information. It's just, this is new for me speaking out about this as I solidify my studies and experience with an ecological background and with that social, the social ecology, social permaculture, it's called for some people, and really bringing that all together in this holistic approach, which emphasis on holistic being, we can't just throw that term around. We can't say, oh, because this or that, I just decide this is holistic. Like, what does holistic actually mean? Integration of everything, meaning the context of our political atmosphere, the context of an eco-genocide, the context of a heritage, a lineage based off of your particular bloodline, the color of your skin. All of these things are real in the context of our society. So in a therapeutic type of space, we're operating holistically when we're taking all of this into consideration. It doesn't mean we always need to be talking explicitly about it, only if that's works for you or for the client or for whoever. But just to know there are factors that are relevant for every single person, because we're not operating in a vacuum. So naming that, and for a lot of people, this could be spiritual, but it also could be, for me, it was really biological too, because our biology, our physical meat suits are walking around, carrying our experiences all the time. So that I don't personally think, and I know many other people, there's many schools of thought on this, and it's not my idea, of course, that we are attached with the earth. So we get our food from the earth, we breathe air, we create waste. We have these functions that are completely in it. We cannot extract ourselves from the earth. Try as society, industrial society might, just simply doesn't work, because it would be operating in a false reality. It's not real. We are earth. We're not on the earth. We're not from the earth. We are earth. We are sort of like an appendage of earth walking around, or like her babies or something. I mean, that might seem like a weird thought to some of you, but like, once again, there's many different ways we could think about this. And because for me, I studied biological sciences before I found my own spiritual path. So for me, this is very much like based in physical energy of, my body was birthed from an alchemizing of food, of air and water through my mother, so on and so forth. And so when we eat food, that's quite an intimate experience, similarly to having sex. Similar, and also very different, obviously, but very intimate. When we eat food, we're turning immaterial into the cells of our body. So that's an intimate experience. And I'm just naming that one to kind of add a piece into this earth attachment idea, as well as to expand how we think about intimacy in general. Because there's a lot of, there's a lot of remnants from past cultures that are quite harmful around intimacy, that cause a lot of suffering and confusion in romantic and or sexual or otherwise close relationships. And so I just think this is relevant to define intimacy for ourselves, and to know we can change that definition too, and to know we can have intimacy with many things, such as food. Just as an example of like a non-sexual, for some people it could be a sexual thing, strawberries out of the belly button sort of thing, but just in general, it's not in explicitly sexual, obviously, and it's part of ourselves, a part of our daily experience, hopefully from everybody, and that it's intimate. So just broadening our perspective, And I think this can be helpful because and this is, something, if you know Esther Perel, she talks about this, but putting so much pressure on one relationship, our partner, um, and wanting to get all of our intimacy needs met by one person is actually really unrealistic for most people. For some people, it could work out and just easily work out. But for most people, even if you are really compatible with your partner, it just simply isn't how we're designed. It's not how we've evolved, and it's just unrealistic. So just throwing that out there, I think it's just an interesting conversation to have around attachment theory in general and how that plays out in different aspects of our lives, with our habits, our hobbies, food, with the planet. And if you're on a introspective path of healing that's never ending, it's our whole lives on this beautiful journey that we're so lucky to be in. Just knowing that what's happening with the earth is probably relevant. Yeah, like I said before, for some people, it helps to connect around this in a spiritual way. For some people, this nature wound, our need to be connected with nature because we are nature, to be having this deep remembering. And for some, it could just simply be energetic, like cycle of life. However you look at it, it's relevant. So yes, I just want to name that with my clients and how I work, this is my very personal foundation, and how I work with my clients is of course attuned to them. So my personal beliefs around this may be relevant, maybe not in an explicit way, because we're always attuning to each other and meeting them where they're at. But I think it's extremely important in the field of mental health for us to have this broader perspective in a general way, to be able to access this, because this is more realistic. People are not operating vacuums, and many of our coping mechanisms that can create challenge are healthy responses to an unhealthy situation, an unhealthy society or something. So really bridging these gaps, having a lot of self-compassion and empathy, that if you're unable to access a state of calm very often because you're hyper aware of the climate emergency, for example, that could be real for somebody. Or they might have that nervousness and not know that it's attached to this global situation, because it can be quite overwhelming. And I think through this somatic-based introspective work, we can start to bridge those gaps. We can use our passions, and we can use our connection with our body, our connection and access to pleasure, to fortify our abilities to be in this situation. And that's my hope with this work. And that's my work for myself too, that I'm doing, and that I've been able to access so that I can carry this forward. But just naming that not everything's something to fix, but everything is something to love in one way or another, even if it's not okay. Okay, that's not okay. And we can have compassion for why that's happening, and we can still have a boundary. Okay, that's not okay. Just considering general boundaries of what works for us, or what does and doesn't work for us. Yeah. So thank you for tuning in. I really enjoy this conversation around attachment theory and expanding it beyond romantic relationships and to the context of our reality, our life support systems, and all of us just practicing being more and more real with each other, and with a bunch of compassion and patience and understanding and flexibility, and knowing we're never going to get it just right, so we can just release that pressure. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being curious about emotional attachment. And I hope you have an amazing day.